Welcome to the Claim Your Day podcast. Here, it's all about taking full advantage of the time we have today and becoming intentional with our actions so we each can have the impact we want. If you want to stop drifting through life and start directing your life, and you're open to a short podcast from someone who's working at the exact same thing, then welcome. You're in the right place, my friend. Hi, I'm your host, Nick Maizy. To respect your time and so you can claim your day, let's dive right in. Yeah, my friend, have you ever looked back on your day and thought, wow, I wish that would have gone a little bit different. Or I wish I would have handled the situation a little bit differently. Or wow, I got really caught up in that and I should have planned for it because I could have seen that coming. And it really derailed me from what I wanted to do. Look, if you said any of those things or thought any of those things, it happens to all of us. Or I can say most of us, certainly myself. Because no one's perfect. No one has that perfect reaction every single time anything comes up. The unexpected things, they'll pop up. They'll take you by surprise. You're going to get put in that challenging situation where the best choice in the moment isn't exactly what you would have wished for it to be. Maybe even it's just the best choice in that given situation. That's life and it happens. So what can you and I, do to live more intentionally, to be able to say yes to our values more and no to the things that don't align with what we each individually believe is most important. What can we do so that when those unexpected challenges and situations pop up, like we're already prepared a little bit so that we can live according to our values and not make the best choice that really isn't what we want? Well, my friend, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Is what will you say yes to today? Also, what might you end up saying no to today that you don't want to? Can you see something coming up today that you want to prioritize, but you think something might get in the way? This is where being a little bit intentional really comes in. God is the only one that knows the future, and and no one has a crystal ball to see what's going to happen. But we can use a simple little trick, and it's simple, it really is, but a simple little trick, can really make a difference in our ability to claim our day, to be intentional with what we do, and to be able to say yes to our values. Now, I'm calling it a little bit of a trick because, honestly, not a lot of people do it. It is really simple, and don't laugh because how simple it is. Don't brush it off because it's not something complicated, some 94-step process that I've patented. None of that. In fact, John Maxwell, he's really successful in his area of communication and leadership and teaching and training. He kind of jokes around a little bit. He is so boring successful. What he means by that is he doesn't use complicated processes. He just sticks to the basics and does them consistently. It's often doing the simple things on a consistent basis that will allow you to have the life you want. You just got to stick to it. Don't quit. And really just keep it simple. So let's start. What do you want to say yes to today? What are your values that you want to honor today? What are your values? Think through them. It's even better is to write them out. Write out what you value most. And that way, you can be intentional and say, hey, I'm going to say yes to these things. And how can you honor those today? And starting to thinking through, that way we can be intentional by actually thinking in advance what's going to happen, what's going to come up, what are our values, and how are we going to be able to prioritize saying yes to our values? It's not having to plan out every single moment of every day. So you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know the future. But if you're just narrowing it down to your values that you want to prioritize, then you can start your day by planning out those big yeses that are really important to you, your values, your family. So let's make a plan for how you're going to live that out, how you're going to live that out today. Because let's be real, you're going to be attacked. You're going to be attacked. You got to have a plan. It's not going to go perfect exactly according to plan. That'll be a different episode. But you got to have a plan because you will be attacked. Distractions, demands, social pressure, and pretty much, let's face it, society at large will most likely come to attack your desire to live with intention according to your values and pursuing the goals that you believe are most important for you and your family. Like I'm not trying to over dramatize this or something like that. You know, I'm not joking. You're not really. You're going to be attacked. And these things are going to come up and try to attack you and derail you from living according to your values. It seems like people in general, they respect those that have lived intentionally, that have done the work. They've already made the progress. They've achieved their goals, and they have this something to show for it by the end result. But it's only after it's done. Those exact same people that value and respect those that have achieved their goals, those exact same people, generally will talk junk and question your actions when you are striving to live intentionally, when you're striving to do the work, to honor your values, when you're doing all that you can to make progress towards your goals that are most important to you and your family. A lot of times that doesn't make sense to people. And this will also be a future episode. We're not going to dive into kind of their reasons why, even if it's from a good perspective, but people that are actually trying to stop you from living intentionally, we'll dive into that later, but it's going to happen because it's not going to make sense when you are doing all that you can to be intentional, to stop drifting. So instead, this episode, let's just talk about something that you can do. What can you do about it? Well, as I said a minute ago, identifying some of your values, one or some of your values that you really want to honor today, even the next 2 days, but getting more specific in what's right here and now and how you're going to honor your values. So you've identified those values. Now, just think through, what are some distractions, demands, or anything else that you think will most likely pop up that will make it more difficult for you to say yes to your values? Think through it. We're going to make a little bit of a plan here. They do this a lot in behavior modification for people that are trying to quit, let's say even just quit drugs or stop a habit, is to think through what's going to come up that's going to make it more difficult for them to stay on the right path. Well, what you're talking about doing today might not be as life-threatening as giving up a life-threatening habit, but you can still use the same tools. All right. So what are some distractions, demands, or things that maybe social pressure? What might pop up that's going to make it really difficult for you to say yes to what you value and what you're trying to say yes to? All right. Well, some examples might be if one of your values is your health, and you say health, maybe health and family, and so you want to have a family meal together at the end of the day. But hey, at the end of my day, I'm going to be rushed. I'm going to be tired. I'm going to be struggling. I'm not going to want to do any of that. Well, that might be some challenge that might pop up for you to make it more difficult for you to say yes to those values. Or if one of your values is faith, just an example might be this, that you want to be able to go to church on Sunday morning, but hey, I'm probably going to feel tired and I don't feel like doing it. I don't feel like going to church. Okay. Or maybe one of your values is your health. Hey, I really need to value my health. I really need to exercise. But I've tried this a whole lot and I am just tired. I'm in a rush and I don't feel like it. Well, that's what we're talking about doing here. It's just a little exercise to think through what one of your values are, how you can honor or say yes to that value, and then what distraction or challenge might come up. So now here's the big part. Now here's where you can make a little bit of a plan. So what will make it a little bit easier, even just a little bit easier, for you to say yes to those values? What comes to mind? Well, now we're going to make a little bit of a plan. Just keep it short, keep it simple, so that you can have a little bit of focus and be able to live your values today. And with that, if it's a family meal, maybe you just set it up a little bit. You do a little bit of meal planning. You're able to make something on the weekends, throw it in the fridge, and then you can have it over the weekdays. Or you just delegate, hey, dad's going to take care of meal this day, mom the other day, whatever it is that makes the most sense for you. Or if it's even, picking something up that the family's going to like and it's going to be a little bit, maybe you haven't done a lot of family meals and it's just going to be something that's, hey, this is a little bit special. We're just going to have some time together. If it's the exercise thing, for me, it's already having my gym clothes and my gym bag. It is all ready to go. and I don't have to make a big deal about it. I just got to grab my bag and half the time it's already in my truck for just making it really easy for me. What it is, it's not going to be something that is right all the time, but whatever you can do to make those distractions, demands for your time, whatever's making it a little bit more difficult for you to say yes to your values, is be intentional with a little bit of a plan, just so that you know that it can be a little bit easier for you to say that yes. Your plan does not need to make sense to everybody. You living intentionally will not make sense to everybody. Other people won't get why you don't just drift along like many other or even most people. That's okay. Other people aren't going to get it. It's not for them. It's for you and your values. In fact, if people start to question why you're trying to, really get intentional about some of these smaller behaviors to honor your values, if people start to question that, then that's a great thing, because you're starting to stand out from the average norm. This is not the Let's Be Average podcast. This is I want you to claim your day. Because by being a little bit intentional, you can say yes to your values. You can start to drift less. You can actually claim your day. You can begin to live the life that you want to live. I believe a lot of that does start with getting clear on the values you want to live by, identifying how you're going to honor those values, coming up with or starting to think through some ideas of what's going to come your way that might be able to derail you. What are the things that have happened before or might happen in the future that will make it more difficult for you to say yes to your values? Now, what's just one or two things? What are just one or two things that you can do to make it a little bit easier for you to say yes to your values, to honor them, so that you can begin to claim your day how you want it to go? Think through those things. Make a little bit of a plan. Give yourself a little bit of a grace when when it all doesn't go perfect. But don't give up, my friend, because you can do it. All right. Here's to you, my friend. Claim your day, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.